Hi everyone, my name is Carol and I'm an interviewer with Wicked Connections. Today we're really excited to be bringing you our next interviewee. As a high school student not too long ago, I remember when I was thinking about careers that there are just a couple of those, big three options you think about: doctor, lawyer, engineer, or whatnot. And sometimes I wish that I knew more options. And after going to undergrad, after actually starting my job in consulting, there are so many options that I never even thought about before that I wish I had considered. So the topic that we'd love to talk to today with Yahia is about data. So without further ado, Yahia, why don't you take a second and introduce yourself?
So my name's Yahia. I have a interesting career. I started off as an engineer, something familiar to a lot of high school students. I was a environmental engineer, and I did a couple of pivots and ended up in data analytics. So I studied at Waterloo, ended up moving abroad for a couple of years to do a master's, and eventually transitioned into a data analytics job, and after that transitioned into more of a product management job where now I work in data products essentially.
That's really exciting. And, Yahya, I love that you actually went through a journey. You started in one of those classic careers I mentioned, and then you moved into data. So, would love to learn a little bit more about that soon. But, to start off in this first video, we really wanted to understand, what is data analytics? What is data science? So, to start off, could you maybe give us a bit more detail? What is data analytics in your opinion? And if you could even bring in some real world examples so people understand where does it fit in our society, that would be awesome.
Yeah, so data analytics is getting more and more broad by the day. uh, it's essentially using data to answer questions or to solve problems. um, Data science more generally is um, it's a little bit more broad than analytics. It's using machine learning and AI to solve problems and answer questions, whereas analytics is more about using statistics and simple mathematical techniques to do the same thing: answer questions and solve problems.
I love that answer. So it's about problem solving using data. That's really awesome. And Yahia, I think you even caught on to like something that I wasn't quite clear on, which is the difference between like data science, data analytics. Is there any other data field that you also want to call out and distinguish, or you think these are the two big ones?
These are the two big ones. There's one other one which is called data engineering, which is getting more and more clear to the masses in terms of the ability to define what it is. Because this is such a new field, it's hard to define what each role is. Typically, you have one person doing multiple roles, depending on the time of day or the time of year. And now, as the field matures, people are doing dedicated roles. They're doing, just data engineering or just data analytics. Um, but these things used to be done by one person, all of them, as the field was growing. So the third one would be data engineering, and that's more focused on setting everything up for the data analysts and the data scientists. So think of it as the software engineer in data.
Okay, love it. That makes a lot of sense. And Yahia, just to make it, more exciting for students, can you talk about a time, for data analytics that you use data to solve a problem? Like what's an example of problems that you solve?
Yeah, so a common use case in data analytics is to understand how the business is performing. So you work at a company, and the company wants to know how they're doing in the general sense. How much money are we making? How much profits are we making? So that would be revenue minus costs. Um, and they want to know about their customers. They want to know how much are they buying? Are they repeatedly buying the same kinds of things? Are they buying more after we send out ads? Are our ads working? And these are the types of questions that they want to ask and get answered through data analytics. And we use several mathematical techniques to help answer those questions.
Right, understood. Yahya, when you say that, it reminds me actually um, of the movie, The Big Short, where, previously maybe people were going with their intuition, like, oh, I love this player, he feels good. But once you actually looked at the data, you actually started to reprioritize people. So that could be, like you said, essentially a lot of KPIs, key performance indicators that data really shows without that human bias. Of course, I'm sure data has human elements based on the way we show the metrics we show. But regardless, I think this is really exciting, and I think it can really, show young people the power of data behind, our intuition and our judgment for sure. So thank you so much, Yahya, for describing the differences between the fields. And like one more follow up question on that would be: are these fields all, in the business setting, or is it would you consider them more in like the technology setting, maybe even for data engineering in the engineering section? Like how would you describe it, just so that students can kind of wrap their head around, what kind of fields they would pursue, the jobs they would end up in?
Yeah, so most of the data uh, jobs that exist, they exist in big technology companies. So Google, Facebook, LinkedIn, Microsoft, Apple, Tesla, um, big companies like that. And but these roles are also coming up in traditional, I would say traditional companies like big retail chains, Walmart, Shoppers Drug Mart, Costco, Canadian Tire, and also at big banks. So finance, retail, marketing, um, and basically every field is now defining a role for data professionals to add value to the company. So, but there's definitely more on the technology side right now. Um, when it comes to data analysts and analytics, that's more of a business oriented role. Um, but they are still working heavily with technology people.
And this is across data science, analytics, and engineering, you would say? Like that all of these fields are hiring across these roles, or just for data analytics?
All three roles are highly sought after right now. Companies are aggressively hiring for especially data engineers, and the second would be data analysts, and third would be data scientists. Even though data science is the most popular term, it's now being kind of split off into these multiple subcategories.
Understood. Okay. So I think, Yahia, you painted a really great picture of like what data science is and where it's found. But I think a critical questions that all our students ask are always, like whether or not it's right for them. So can you talk a bit about the career itself? Like what drew you to data? Whether it's like the work itself, the lifestyle, beyond, the subject, or maybe exit opportunities. Can you talk a little bit about what attracted you there?
So the number one thing you want to think about in terms of considering this career is: are you a curious person? Uh, Fundamentally, this line of work is about answering questions that don't really have an answer. It's not something you can easily look up. It requires a lot of trial and error. So, are you a curious person? Do you like to answer questions that are kind of hard to answer? And, you know, a common way to approach these problems and the questions that are asked in business for data analysts is that um, can you look at this data, look at all these numbers, uh, and can you come up with an answer to our question using all of this, information? So you have to be good at researching and looking at a lot of numbers and making sense of numbers. So you don't necessarily have to be a math whiz or really good at science or coding, but you have to be really curious and able to understand those things on a basic level, math and science and statistics and a little bit of coding. Um, if you use Excel, for example, in high school, maybe you took an intro to Python course. If you enjoyed those subjects, then you'll probably more likely to enjoy data analytics. On the career side, there are a lot of perks to working as a data analyst. Number one, it's a very in demand profession. So you have the ability to move between companies, you have the ability to move up more so than other professions. My previous profession, I was a environmental engineer, and there weren't as many opportunities to move around or to demand higher salaries when moving between companies and so on. So, by virtue of being in the technology field, you have a lot of opportunities. Um, and it is, being in technology, there is more of a progressive culture of um, allowing flexible work hours and working from home and, you know, perks like that.
Yeah. This sounds like a dream career in many senses. So what I'm hearing is, there is a fundamental level of, math and maybe some level of coding, but what really distinguishes you is your problem solving ability, which I think it sounds as though like making the numbers make sense. Like what is the story behind the number, right? And like having that business acumen, it sounds as though it's very important in the field. Okay, awesome. So thank you so much, Yahia, for describing, at a high level what data science is. If this sounds like it's a field right for you, I highly suggest you tune into our next video with Yahia about how to actually launch your career in data science. So thank you so much, Yahia.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.